What's going on, guys? This is, welcome back to Convert. My name is Cody Meyer. I'm the Director of Lead Conversion here at Hatch Realty. Here always with Mr. Jim Renfro, the greatest ISA in the USA, coming at you live the day after Election Day.
Yeah.
And hope everybody watching us is happy and well. Today we're talking about using Zillow and Realtor.com leads as loss leaders. So, jumping in Jimmy, Eric talks a lot about, different types of lead and lead qualities, and there's no such thing as a bad quality lead.
Right.
So when we talk about a loss leader, what are we actually talking about here?
Well, for us, we always look at ROI. So you look at the average PPC lead, that might have a 10x ROI year over year. And so it's really good. The problem is you're competing. There's definitely a cap on it. And you're going to be competing on all these lead sources. But with Zillow, our ROI may be 1.5, 2 times after splits sometimes. And we ran a loss, basically from 2014, 15, 16. And a little bit of 17, we ran a loss, meaning we didn't make profit on Zillow.
Sure.
If you look at that from a business decision, that makes no sense whatsoever. But what we saw is, especially up here, typically if you're a first-time buyer, and maybe you can only get into a house that's $120,000, but that's not the house you want. So they're staying in these houses 3, maybe 4 years. And we've had several of these clients from 2014 and 2015 that now have bought 2014, 2015, sold and bought again 2017, sold and bought again this year. And so while the first transaction, you may only make $1,000, maybe if that. But now what you're looking at is the lifetime value of these clients. In our market, if you go to NAR's website, there's a tool on there you can use to get the lifetime value. So up here, our lifetime value is about $23,000 per client. And so if you look at that, when you're evaluating Zillow and say, okay, I may not lose money on this, but over the course of the next decade, I have an opportunity to make several thousands of dollars back from it.
And so really just essentially playing the long game, with any of your lead sources.
Yeah, with any of your lead sources. So we do that with lead conversion. We do that with lead acquisition as well. And so we're always going to play the long game. Too many agents and too many businesses play the short game. They only look at short-term profits. They'll try a lead source for a month, 2 months, if that. And it's not productive because you're not judging it on the right characteristics and the right time frame.
And so, when you're talking about, let's take a step back before we go too far down the rabbit hole. First and foremost, how are you calculating ROI of a lead source? And then second, when you say lifetime value, can you kind of break that down one more time?
Yeah, for ROI for us, we always judge it after splits. So for instance, with Zillow, we're going to drop $200,000 this year, roughly, on leads. Right now, as of November 4th, we have about 123 pending and closed deals for this year. Our average commission up here is $6,600. Cut that in half, $3,300 goes out the door. So you look at that ROI, you spent $200 and maybe you're making $330, $340 before paying out your admin and all these other salaries. So by the time you get through all that, you're not really making that much.
And so, with that in mind, we're talking about, PPC returns versus like a Zillow or a Realtor.com as we kind of frame that through the idea of lifetime value. So what do you see as being the big differentiator between a PPC's lifetime value and a Zillow lead's lifetime value?
Well, I think a Zillow lead's lifetime value, you're going to have that return on investment a little bit quicker. The average registration to close on those is about 6 months. The average registration to close on a PPC lead is closer to 18 months. So as far as the value comparing the two, I don't really compare the two at all. In a lot of ways, this one is long-term dividends. This one is short-term dividends. And so they'll both pay out long-term as long as you have a program to take care of your past clients. But overall, as far as the question, no, I judge them pretty much the same way. PPC will usually get a 10x ROI right away. So it's a good way to build your base. But if you need instant type closings, Zillow and Realtor is the way to go.
Okay.
Build your base on Sphere, build your base on PPC, and trickle in everything else. But realize, even though I'm not making ROI on it, If you can afford to, keep doing it, because long term you're going to get way more transactions out of it.
And what would be the play then when I think back to, obviously it's a little bit different for us now in kind of the history of Hatch Realty and, the size of the brokerage, but what would you say, like looking backwards to, a small team that's maybe got, 5 producing agents, the Rainmaker's still in full-time production. Perhaps they have an ISA department, maybe they don't, but, they've got to figure out this lead strategy if they're going to scale and grow.
Right.
I mean, what would you say to them in that instance?
Yeah, I mean, the smaller the team, the easier it is for Zillow, and the quicker your ROI can happen. So if I were a team again, what I would have done, let's zoom back to 2014. We didn't really have a plan. We were kind of going by the seat of our pants, buying, I think it was about $3,000 a month back then on Zillow. It wasn't much. And I think $500 a month in PPC. What we should have done is done much more long-term planning, like you've talked about on the 12 rolling month, and said, okay, basically 2015 our goal is this, 2016 our goal is this. Let's move back 18 months and say, okay, what do I need for new leads today in order to hit that goal? And so you build your base with PPC, that should be your foundation. And then if you're behind, sprinkle in more Zillow, because those will pop way quicker.
And I think kind of building on that is, when we're talking about lifetime, value, we're coming in with, Zillow leads as they contact and reach out to us, which we know a lot of the information about them right away. It's easier to retain that lifetime value. As compared to a PPC, I mean, I don't know how many PPC registrations I've gotten from Mickey Mouse, Barack Obama,
Right.
along with some more vulgar names that people will often register with.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is it's left to, in our world, we have what's called the burn rate. And especially with PPCs, there is a certain percentage that every iteration, be it 1,000 leads for an example, we know there's a certain amount, a certain percentage point that we will never be able to get in contact with for that very same reason. People don't want to put that information out. However, with Zillow and the Realtor.coms and all those little more, higher dollar cap lead sources, they're going to be, because they're motivated to move, we generally have a correct email address or phone number. And generally, even if we don't have one, if we have one or the other, we have a lot of tools at our disposal to be able to find that other, that email address or find that phone number. We have a lot of ways to mitigate errors in reporting when it comes to Zillow. I mean, their data is the best, which I'll let Jim talk about that a little bit more. But, when we have all of this information about the consumer, it's easier to provide value right away. And we can tap into that and, be creating that lifetime value because we have what we need. Whether they decide to buy right now or not, we have what we need to, continually chase and continually provide value to them. So
yeah, I think going back into that to talk about the lifetime value and talk about the data. When you're buying a lead source, what I've always told Cody is most realtors are going to look at this as a transaction, right? They're going to say, I spent $1,000, I get $3,000 back. That's a decent way to look at it, but what is the actual value of having valid data for retargeting? Because now if you have all these people in your system, your cost per lead goes down to maybe $1. And so get right data, put it into the system, because we buy cold data, we buy everything else. A lot of times though, data's not that great. And so that's the primary reason we're still using Zillow. Do I like cutting a check to them for $200,000 a year? No, I don't. But until I can find something else to replace that 120 transactions a year that allows us to grow and scale, I'm going to have to keep doing it, and then keep, getting the fruit on the listing side from those past clients.
And so with that in mind, I mean, what would you say to brokerages who are in the position where they can consider flex, because this Zillow flex pricing has become, very, a very popular conversation, and frankly, it's a conversation that, keeps a lot of realtors up at night, because the value proposition is certainly there, but it comes at a cost, So what would you say as you're thinking in the context of lifetime value to, a brokerage who is considering, do I go flex or do I not?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, with the flex program or not, I mean, what we look at is, okay, I know what my break-even point is, how many transactions I need. Anything over that, if I'm on flex, costs us more money. Anything under that, we're winning compared to flex. And so as far as lifetime value, I mean, basically, if you're a single agent, the conversation is way more easy. If you're a team, it gets really tough because right now we have 26 agents between everybody now that's licensed that we have to feed, and so that gets really expensive. And so as far as lifetime value, it's basically, can you afford to lose money or make a little bit of money up front in order to grow your system? And once you have that data, once you have that system, now you actually have a product you can exit, quite frankly, and sell your data to someone else if you want and get out of the business. It's much easier if you have good data to do everything else.
Absolutely. And so, kind of taking all of this idea of lifetime value and, using these Zillow, we've used Zillow interchangeably. I think Realtor.com, really any of these higher.
Mellow, you could talk Mellow Home.
Homes.
Any of these ones where basically there's a large cost per closing to them. So Mellow Home, anything that's a referral, anything like that.
Yeah. And so, when we're talking about Zillow, because it's kind of the front of mind one that's on a lot of people's minds, this is kind of interchangeable with all that. And so taking this idea of lifetime value, starting from scratch, let's say we're talking to this, five agent team, like first and foremost, how should they be calculating lifetime value if they're forward planning and looking to grow and scale a business?
Yeah, there's tons of tools out there. You can just go to NAR site for that one. We could put a link below the video, I'm sure. But the way that I look at lifetime value is, okay, how often do they buy a new house? What's my average commission rate? What's my price point? How old is my average client? And then how many referrals do you think that client will generate over the course of their lifetime? So that's where I think this NAR stat is kind of skewed, because they say each client should bring you 2 clients over the course of their life. I think that number is low. There's a lot of places it says for every 12 people in your system, you should get 2 referrals, or 1 business with that person plus 1 referral each year is kind of the numbers that are talked about. And so the way I would look at lifetime value is it just real estate? Do you also have a title company? Do you also have a mortgage company? Do you have a contractor? Look at every revenue source you have and then add all those up, and that's your lifetime client value. And most of the time when we were looking a couple of years ago, just based on the referrals we get from people, it was closer to $85,000, $90,000, and that's after splits. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think to anybody who's watching this is probably, somewhere in the Hatch coaching ecosystem. You've seen Eric talk about this stuff time in and time out, where he is, leveraging not just his capital, but, his experience in the, in the home buying and home selling process, to know that there are 15 to 20 different businesses that can be split out and grown. Yeah. And, that scales that lifetime value at an unreasonable amount, and then we're able to, continue to leverage. And frankly, it's good for the consumer. It's not just a money play. It's really good for the consumer to know that we can be this all-inclusive, this all-inclusive package. And so, as we're thinking about that, this team has the ability now to calculate lifetime value. What comes next?
Ooh, I think what comes next is really evaluate and look at all your lead sources and say, okay, maybe I'm not making money on this, but how many actual leads am I getting and how good is the data? So if I have, a lead source where I'm getting 500 leads a month, 80, 90% of that data is good. If I'm not really getting anything on it, I don't care, because I'm adding 6,000 people in my database a year, which that's 6,000 people we can retarget. We can do everything else that gives us a better idea of our typical consumer in our marketplace as well. So that's how I would look at it, is if you're evaluating leads, look at it, okay, can I afford to lose money on this if it's growing my database? And secondly, okay, what's my ROI?
And so, knowing that the answer to that question, if that same team is then saying, well, do we more heavily invest in Zillow, or do we, really heavily invest in PPC? What would you tell them?
I would say it depends. Like for us, we are pretty much capped with Zillow unless we go on Flex. We can't buy anymore. So what we've even done now is we're going out to these smaller communities, 30, 45 miles, for some of these newer agents, and saying, this is where you're going to get, because this is all we can get for you. And so if you can still buy in and it makes sense for a long-term play in ROI, great, but those zip codes are highly competitive. You might need to build your PPC bench much sooner than you think, because it's going to take you 18 to 24 months to really capitalize. What we've seen is it's about 1% a year. So let's say that lead comes in, let's say we had 5,000 leads come in 5 years ago. over that 5 years, we probably are going to convert at about a 5% over that 5 years. So it's about 1% a year on PPC, Facebook, those type of leads. So look at it and say, okay, what's the best to scale my business? The most cost efficient, but also, hey, if I bring in a lifetime value of this client, I'm paying more money up front, but I know I can keep these clients. Because the other indicator on there is the NAR stat was only 23% of people use that agent again. And so for us, our number's much higher. They're 50, 60, 70% sometimes. And so really know your numbers and then evaluate what makes sense for you as a business. It might make sense to lose money on the front side. It might not. If you can afford to do it, you can do the error catch model. We lost money in the first 5 years, right? We went from 414 transactions in 2014, and this year we'll finish at about 900, 850, 900?
About 850.
Yeah, 850. So, I mean, the only reason we were able to do that, though, is we kept those past clients engaged and getting a lot of that sphere.
And I mean, kind of along that same, line of thought this is a fantastic feeder for all of our client events, for, future listings, having that built in, and that's kind of,
also recruiting.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah. We've hired a bunch of people that were past clients.
Yeah. And, so while that initial investment might be, a little steeper than on the PPC side, I think you're going to have to do a cost-benefit analysis, and figure it out and use it as a loss leader, because while it is expensive, it can be one of, having that correct data and, being able to scale it as a...
Yeah. If you're playing the transaction game, if you lose on the first one, you're going to be pissed. Out of my 970 deals that I have right now, I guarantee about 200 of them are from ones that I missed the first time. And so as long as you have them in the system, you're retargeting them, maybe they didn't use you the first time, but hammer them with your retargeting, and they'll use you the second, third, fourth, fifth.
Yeah. And I think that's a solid place to stop, unless there's anything we're missing.
No, I think, go out, look at your lead sources, see what makes sense, go calculate your lifetime value of your clients, see what, you'll be shocked and probably a little pissed off even, because every time you lose one, you're not just losing $6,000 or $12,000, you're losing $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. So
adds up quick.
Yeah, it adds up real quick.
All right. Well, that was using Zillow or Realtor as a loss leader. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video.